All right. Uh, Sorry about the few minutes delay here, guys. Happy New Year's or happy Merry Christmas Eve. Anybody that's tuning in, I'm working again on this commission for the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Seems like a pretty good theme for this time of year. Um, so yeah, this week I think I need to. So I got the bikers and the characters kind of painted in, and I'm pushing them back into space using some atmospheric perspective. What that means is like things that are farther away from you tend to be faded into the background or lighter in color. If you think of like seeing a building on a foggy day that's away from you, the farther away it is, the more obscure it becomes, and the value structures aren't as quite as extreme. So the darker things are, more contrast is forward, and the less contrast is backward. So if you think about the concept of um, color and shape, so the color is basically shape. There is no shape without a color, no color without a shape. And what shapes are basically on top of that is that there's no color and shape. It's just foreground and background. So we're using these concepts of contrasting temperature and color, value structure, which is the lightness or darkness of a color or of a shape, and does it sit behind or in front of each other. So all these shapes are competing for visual uh, like importance as far as like relevance to how close it is to the view, to the frame of reference, to how far in space that would go. So if we're thinking about this as not a two-dimensional surface creating the illusion of three-dimensional depth, that's what we're going after, is creating this idea of pushing foreground and background in every sense, in sense of objects in the painting, in the sense of um, just shapes, and we're using color, hue, which is like, so I have red and brownish colors and yellowish green colors. We're using the saturation, how bright that color is or how gray it is, and then how dark it is, and then how warm it is. So these four sort of aspects of color to create a relationship of foreground and background. Um, anyway, so a lot of talk. Let me transition the view a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. All right. So let's get started on working on this. So one of the things that I'm also working on this at this stage of this painting is kind of making it seem alive, and kind of like it's breathing, like it's not just sort of static monolithic thing sitting there. These things are moving. There's an environment. There's dust. There's all that stuff. So at this point, I kind of can't rely on too much of my references. I got to kind of figure out like there's some objectives here that I want to do. So I want this character to kind of be, I want these characters to be separated from each other visually, but at the same time be connected as a group. So there's got to be something that does both of those things. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, I think, create more smoke and flames coming off of this one, and to create more dust and smoke that's going to go back and kind of create a visual line that reinforces this right here and pushes. It'll allow me to separate this character from this character. And I kind of think that having them visually planted on the ground is saying too much. I think if I obscure that a little bit more, it allows for the imagination to imagine what is on the ground that they're riding on. Well, it might look like they're riding on smoke or clouds or something. So let's see if I can figure this out. And I like to figure out what I'm going to do along these paintings all the time. That's kind of the fun of it, is solving a visual dilemma, a visual problem. Like, it's not a problem, I suppose, but um, yeah, I'm not even sure where to start. So I'm gonna start somewhere. I think I might use a bigger brush to start laying some of that down. I'm relying right now mostly on these earth tone colors. That might be too light. Let's kind of like it. So I'm bringing this brownish warm color up into this foreground. So it's interesting to think, like, so this second character in is the Black Horseman, four horsemen of the apocalypse. And the thing is, if I just try to paint it black, it's gonna read kind of weird. So I got to figure out a way to make it look like a Black Rider without just painting it black. Same with the red. It's got to be red without being too much. I think I want to bring some of that red in. Let's see here. Back to this brush. I like that color, but that's not the right place. That's mentioned in my last stream that I've been using digital tools to help visualize some of these paintings. And the one thing that it's kind of weird now that it occurs to me that in digital work you don't have to like keep going back and mixing your colors and loading your paintbrush. The the brush is always loaded with paint in digital work, and it never dries or gets clumpy or does weird crap, which is one of the advantages of it, I suppose. But, and it kind of makes more apparent the difficulty of doing traditional work is that you have all these materials that you have to get to cooperate with what you're doing. And I never really thought about it too much because it's always been the way it's just the way it is. But it's one of the things that it's fun too because in digital work you never get the satisfaction of the feel of the materials, the feel of the way the brush uh, feels against the surface while you're painting it. It's like not having that feedback is really difficult to deal with working traditionally. All you have is like the sense of how hard you push versus what it looks like on a screen. And if you're using pressure sensitive brushes, and you don't end up with brushes that are randomly screwed up and have weird bristles hanging out one end or the other from the way it's been used. The brush on a digital sense is always the same brush. So there's some things that you just don't translate that well. I guess you could program a brush to change over time as you use it. That would be interesting. To introduce some sort of like entropy into the brush on a digital program. I mean, I think that's going to be a lot warmer in color because it's got this warm flames rolling up off of it. So probably get away with that being warm, reddish. I think I can get a little more aggressive. Oh, and bring this orange all the way out here. Let's see. Now I'm going to gray that down. I'm going to use, yeah, I know what I'm going to do. So there's a couple of things to think about in how to decide what colors to use. And what I'm thinking about is um, what the light source that's illuminating anything is, what's causing the light. And so I've kind of established this like magic hour, like late afternoon light, this sort of yellowish, greenish yellowish light. And then this more sunsetty light over here. So like maybe the sun's about to set or something. So that's illuminating the scene. And then I'm established this bike having flames and other like internal glowing light coming out of it as another source of light. So that light is going to hit other things that's close to it. And then the light from the environment is going to light it up different. So the temperature of that light and the color of that light is what I'm looking at. So when I want to create some of the atmospheric light coming down and hitting this dust or whatever it is, it's probably going to be related to the light that's in the sky illuminating down. So if I can remember what colors I used to mix with that, the one thing I can know is that it's not going to be as bright as the light source. So I can mix a version of that color. And it doesn't mean I darken it down, but what I might do is gray it down. And what I'm going to use for this is the sort of same greens and yellows that I use in the sky, but I'm going to mix in raw umber and bring it down to a darker, grayer version of that color, hitting whatever this stuff is. And maybe it's going to be too light. I don't know. But let's see. See what happens. I'm actually going to just pull that in. Kind of like that. Looks cool. I don't know. So let's mix some more of that. Let's do it again. This time, I'm going to keep it on the lighter side. I grade it down with some yellow instead. What I want to do is obscure the ground a bit. Like that. And I got some paintbrush hairs. So now I have like complementary colors of this greenish color and this orangish color working with each other, and they tend to make one glow. Like makes the red seem redder and the green and the yellow seem more vibrant. And even though they're kind of grayed down colors, they're not very saturated. They have the glow because of the complementary interaction between the green and the cool and the reddish warm. So they're both versions of a brown. I've used raw umber and burnt umber. So the burnt umber is for the warmer tones and the raw umber is for the cooler tones. And then I'm playing the temperature of the color and the chromatic value against each other to help create sort of a glowing scene right here. And then to make it go back in space, it's going from darker to lighter also. And I'm not using like black and white to change the value of these colors. I'm using the inherent value in the colors themselves. So this yellow is a very light color value structure wise. So on the grayscale, it's very light, and it's and whatever, you know, as saturated as you can get it, it's still light. So you can use lighter colors that are inherently lighter to change the value structure of a color without having to change, without having to introduce black and white. Black and white tends to change the lots of other things about color that you may not want to change. I was getting a little goober of paint on here. Scratch those out. I think what I wanted to avoid with what I'm doing with this obscuring is, it seems like if you put a lot of detail into everything, the painting gets obscured in the details. Like people get lost in looking at all the detail. And what I want to be what I want to focus on in any particular painting is the trying to give an impression more so. Like there's going to be areas of focus and detail in any painting, but I don't want the focus to be the details. that makes any sense. Okay. So then it comes down to like where do you focus your details in? Where do you obscure things? And that, so you got to figure out like in any particular painting, like what is the what's important to know, and what's important not to know, like knowing what to leave out. Um, like that's where the challenge becomes eventually. Let's see. Just using this yellow ochre seems to make a nice um, background color here for this. Let's see. Yeah, all right. I'll bring some of that brighter color in here. And this might just be all smoke and dust that's being lit up close to here. What seems to make things glow is a contrast between something that's more gray and more vibrant, more saturated in color, or something that's a shift in temperature altogether. Like contrasts of black, dark versus light don't necessarily, I don't think, like make things seem like they're glowing or make them seem atmospheric. when you shift the value structure dominant dominantly versus shifting the temperature or the hue. Eventually, I'm going to paint this guy's hand holding chains and stuff flying backwards, but the reason I haven't is because I knew that I needed to do a lot of painting here, and I'm going to have to keep painting around it. I don't really want to have to paint around it a lot or paint over it. I would be painting over it anyways if I didn't do that. So, if anybody was wondering, that's why. Let's see. I don't like this. This is like the background color. Let me get a smaller brush. But it really is a weird tangent here with this arm. So I gotta do something. I gotta knock that down a bit. So the other thing I could do is hmm, gotta change that to I could bring that light over here. Maybe I'll do that. Hmm. I could really darken that up right there too. Work. Actually, I'm gonna have light coming from over here, hitting his arm too. But yeah, I just gotta figure out a way to pop that out a little more significantly. And I'm going to switch the kind of color I'm using to light up this side because he's got a strong light hitting him over here. Eventually, there's going to be light coming from this headlight, kind of like a hair light over here or something. Keep that. All right. That's probably deal with that. There's gonna be a core light over here. All right. In there. Hmm. Well, all right. I'm gonna do something here real quick. Change this because I want that to be a little more gray. I mean, a little lighter. I mean, actually, I'm gonna make it warmer too. Kind of want that. Want it to pop a little. All right. Let's see. Yeah, all right, so getting some of that reflected light worked into the rest of the painting. So, like, going back to what I was talking about earlier about where to focus the detail, my focus, I think, is going to be in the characters, not so much the details of the bite. So, it's the trick is to figure out, like, you don't want to leave everything out. So, what do you need to leave in to make it work? And what's good to leave up to the viewer's imagination? Ultimately, like, what's the kind of threshold that you have to leave in it for it to look good? And by look at it, I mean it's got to feel right. It's got to feel like it's got to gotta have sort of a matter of factness about it. Which means like you gotta be able to look at it like not have a doubt about what's going on. I mean, as far as you want that feeling in the painting. I don't know if that makes any sense. All right. Well, I kind of want to go do some other stuff today, but I want to get this live stream in and get some work done on this painting. So I'm going to stop for today. Thanks for joining. Feel free to leave questions, comments, or whatever, or not. I don't care. I will talk to you guys later.